Tales from my D&D campaign.
Previously, so we have to get the third spoon ourselves. And save my steward.
I am Ginaron Controller. A bunch of dwarves came down here a few months ago. What happened to them? A small group of dwarves are holding out in Supply Area B. Where is the magic spoon that creates food? Supply Area B. Can you activate the portal? I cannot do that. Attempting to activate it would be dangerous under any circumstances. I'm going to have to insist. Commencing portal activation sequence.
That's not good.
Astral Plague has a nice ring to it. Goodbye, meatbags. So they rush over to Supply Area B, and suddenly they get attacked by these dog-sized tentacle things which climb up from under the bridge to flank them. And these things aren't super dangerous, but they have moderate damage reduction, and no one's weapons get around, and a little fire and cold resist, and worse, if you hit them in melee, they deal 1d6 backlash damage as negative energy. Ranged and reach weapons get around that, but they're having a hard time getting damage through the defenses, so mostly the melee guys slog through at the cost of some attrition, which is starting to hurt because the casters are starting to get low on spells. So they get to the hallway to Supply Area B and find that the workers have started dismantling the barricade and repairing the walls. This must be their natural behavior without the controller giving them orders. I could disassemble the hallway with Mountain Hammer. And I'm like, absolutely, but you can only recycle the same move every second round, so it's going to take a whole minute. A minute? A minute is a long time when they are worried the portal could explode any minute, so after some discussion, they leave the workers to clear the hall and free the missing dwarves while the heroes run back down to the core. And they fight through more dog-sized tentacle things, only now they come with fairy dragonflies which are incorporeal, have different damage reduction, and make direct mental attacks. These ones were pretty fragile if you could hurt them. Little one's cold iron sword could beat their DR, and the electricity had a weird effect. It caused no damage to either the Fae or the Fell creatures, but when they took electrical damage they had to save or be stunned for one round. And they get down to the core and find the old priest standing in the doorway surrounded by black goo which is slowly reforming into dog-sized tentacle things. But he punches them and a burst of electricity from his metal fist re-gooifies them, at least temporarily. A fairy dragonfly attacks him and his armored body responds with a small zap of lightning which stuns it as well.
I can think of only one way to avert a catastrophe at this point. Follow me.
So everyone heads down the narrow stairs inside the 20 by 20 foot cube of the core, leaving just Little One at the top, because his Eberron blade is their best weapon against the intangible things, and his big damage attack moves are pretty good against the dog-sized tentacle things. The core goes down more than 100 feet, widening gradually on the way down. And Greypike is like,
this whole thing is made of their cold iron alloy, and over a foot thick. And Daggerface is like, if it keeps those monsters out, I call that a good thing. And the old priest is like, I only hope it can keep things in. This is the portal. It should never have been activated, and worse, the Dark Ancient told the truth. He somehow disabled the manual failsafe.
What's going to happen?
The portal will continue generating energy until the waves of power saturate the surrounding area. Land, creatures, everything. I cannot really say what will happen, but the reason this facility and others like it were shut down is that this energy is thought to have been connected with the astral plague.
But what is the plague?
I'm afraid I do not know. At the time, I was a mere assistant who performed menial tasks. It was years after the last of the creators had passed that I learned to commune with Itaru, but it affected all of them, and they fell ill one after another and all died off within a generation.
Radiation. He's trying to explain freaking magical radiation.
I am likely safe, as the Warforged were never affected by the astral plague, but I fear for communities that may have risen up near here, and I have no idea how far the effects could extend. So, what's your plan? He said he had a plan, right? There was a final safeguard which was built into this place, but clearly they never really believed it would be needed, so it was not really made to be used.
Well, that sounds promising.
This massive cone above us is an alloy of cold iron and yttronium. If anything could contain or dampen the astral energy, this should, but we need to seal the portal in before we destroy it, by dropping the metal shell down to the ground here. Its own weight will sink it into the floor, and when dropped down, the doorway at the top will be eclipsed by more cold iron enriched metal. But there is no proper mechanism to do this. We must destroy these pillars, and then destroy the portal. So, all we have to do is smash 4 thick stone pillars, and be up at the top before the doorway is sealed, and destroy the portal so it does not continue to pulse energy.
And they float a few ideas, but can't come up with a good way to do all that from up at the top. But the old Warforged knows what needs to be done.
I have learned over the years to cast Otoluk's Resilient Sphere, using the energy of this facility. If you destroy 3 of the columns down here, I will break the stones of the portal, causing it to collapse under its own weight, but I will delay its destruction by interposing myself within a sphere of force. If you can then destroy the 4th pillar somehow from beside the exit, you should be able to dive to safety, and when my spell expires, the portal will destroy itself and the threat will be ended.
So he's
planning to sacrifice himself. We don't even know your name.
I have not needed a name for a long time, but the creators called me GE7, Ginaron Engineer 7.
As he stands there, his blue and silver armor turns a dull matte gray, and the symbols of Itaru disappear, and the whole back of his armor opens up, and what they thought was a heavy-duty, heavy-armored warforged is actually a skinny, lightly built model, more like Temple 1 than a warrior model, who had been wearing this fancy full plate. He steps out of the boots, leaving the empty armor standing on its own.
This armor has served me well for a long time, but I will not be needing it anymore.
And Draven's like, wow, what does it do? It takes a minute for an artificer to properly identify a magic item's properties, and time is precious, but Draven isn't great at physical labor anyway, so he studies it while the others get to work on the pillars. Black and Little One can beat through the hardness with their physical strength, and Angel uses her knowledge of engineering to find a weak spot in one pillar where she can apply her sneak attack damage. And the Ancient's mechanized plate is +2 full plate armor with electrical resist, negative energy resist, and has a special stability mode, which can be turned on or off as a move action, immobilizing the wearer, but doubling those resists and giving it +4 to any ability check or +2 to any saving throw against abilities which would trip or move or even teleport the wearer. Both fists are +1 enchanted heavy locked gauntlets which can lock a weapon in hand as a move action or unlock as a swift action, protecting from disarming attacks. It can also be packed up or unpacked as a move action, and once unpacked, it can be equipped or unequipped as a full round action. And that's all not counting extra bonus powers it gains while within Ginaron.
Holy crap.
Put it on. It actually takes several rounds for Black just to remove his +1 plate armor, even with assistance. But he steps onto the boots, thinks about putting it on, and the armor adjusts quickly to his taller stature, closes around his arms, legs, and torso, and the thin-looking padding inside expands to meld tightly to his form everywhere but inside the joints. And once fully suited up, it changes color to a matte black, and even forms a symbol of his god, Sirius, on the pauldrons. And Black is like, wow. So it even adapts its appearance. If it wasn't a divine spellcaster, it wouldn't generate shoulder symbols, but yes, this guy is not an expert craftsman by any means, but unlike any artificer you know, he was able to tinker for a few hours a day every day for hundreds of years, just optimizing. And Little One's like, that's pretty badass. And without his armor, the Warforged looks so much older and more frail than a few minutes before. And Draven's like, this is so wrong. There has to be some way we can do this without sacrificing him. This guy has so much knowledge of stuff that has been lost. He could read those books from the library without spending months researching them. Are you volunteering? No. But there has to be a better way to hold the portal open. Can't he just cast the sphere from outside? Odaluk's Resilient Sphere has to target a creature. It's basically indestructible, nothing can get in or out. I think it's even immovable. It's very powerful for a 4th level spell, but you have to cast it on a creature. And in this case you want a willing creature, because an unwilling creature might pass the saving throw, causing the spell to fail. And they all try to think of another spell to do the job, because Draven can theoretically cast any low-level arcane spell, but he's super low on castings now. In fact, the only thing he can come up with is he could cast the sphere on 7 instead. But 7's like a familiar, right? Won't you lose XP? I put my own blood into him. He's like part of me. A part that can be rebuilt.
You'd be trading 7 for GE7.
So technically you're gaining 2 letters. Good deal. It is a good deal. And Draven took it pretty hard, but he couldn't overcome his own argument that GE7 was of much greater value to the world, and presumably the party, than his homunculus. And though the Warforged was willing to sacrifice himself for the greater good, he certainly had no desire to die. The new plan is to badly damage 3 of the 4 pillars, then carefully weaken the last one. 7 will fly right up to the portal, GE7 will bubble him, and take out one side of the portal's arch with a stone-shaped spell, letting the force sphere take the weight and prevent it from collapsing in on itself. Then they can just run up to the top of the stairs, buff Draven's crossbow, shoot out the last pillar, and Indiana Jones through the doorway before the cold iron shell drops far enough to seal it off forever. And Draven casts Fly on himself so he can make his escape faster, and the plan goes off mostly without a hitch. It took a couple shots for Draven to hit the weak spot Angel had indicated, but once he does, the structure shifts a little, the weight crushes the other pillars out of the way, and Draven, barely, manages to slide through without being guillotined by the doorway.
We have a minimum of 7 minutes before my spell fails. I tried to augment it using energy from the facility.
but at the current water levels, we must assume the minimum. And time was important, because while he assured them that dropping the containment dome should prevent a wide release of dangerous energy, and destroying the portal will result in much less total energy than just leaving it on, there was still a risk that its destruction would release a dangerous pulse which might not be completely absorbed. In other words, they would be wise to get as far as possible before the thing blows, just in case. And Black's like,
wait, if you saved him, he's going to want his armor back, isn't he?
and I'm like, he gave it to you fully expecting to die. Given that you found a way for him to not die, the armor seems like a fair trade.
Even if we all get out of here, I expect your future will see a lot more battle than mine.
Draven still has some time on his spell, so he flies up and attaches a grappling hook to the next bridge as a shortcut. And they get waylaid by more random encounters, and they find out that the fairy dragonflies each have an alternate attack they can use once per day with a much harder will save that puts the target to sleep. Worse, they can move into a sleeping target and control them like clumsy puppets. One takes over Greypike and attacks, but hitting him for non-lethal damage knocks him out of it, forcing the fairy dragonfly out where Little One's Eladrin blade slices it into nothing. And they reach supply area B to find most of the barricade has been cleared by the workers, and though Little One could have mountain hammered his way through in a couple rounds, Angel is now able to slip through and open the door where they find... uh-oh. They slap the fairy dragonfly out of the one dwarf, but it's too late for the other. DeCorso Stewart is alive, with the third magic spoon, but in the most tragic of irony, after nearly 3 months trapped together in this storeroom, only minutes before release, he had been mind-controlled into killing his friend, leaving him the last surviving member of the first expedition. No time for grieving, they have as little as 5 minutes to escape from the bowels of Ginaron, fighting off endless swarms of minor planar elementals. Even as they emerge from supply area B, they find Tira, who was helping guard their rear, was slain by a dog-sized tentacle thing. He lasted just long enough for a brief death scene with GE7, and then, after a brief moment of silence, Little One is like, oh well, we got a better priest. Yeah, upgrade. Better priest aside, this place had gone from easy-breezy exploring to a full marathon ordeal, and if not for GE7, the party would have only a couple spells left between them. The constant attacks were individually not threatening, but they continued to eat resources the party could no longer afford to spend. On the plus side, as long as they were in an Antaran facility, Black's new armor had electrical backlash damage and added electricity to his weapon attacks, which still didn't injure these things, but every time he hit or was hit by them, they had about a 40% chance to be stunned for a round. Little One's sword worked fine on the incorporeal enemies, and realizing that, Angel and the dwarf squad all dig out cold iron tongs, scalpels, and anything else they had looted from the Fey Lab to use as weapons. And they reached the hall in front of the library to find the Diluvian priestess and her forces. They had been fighting seemingly endless workers for weeks, since most of the damaged ones were dragged down to the repair bays and mechanical, only to come back good as new. And though they made short work of those after the controller went down, they were immediately swarmed by all this other crap. Now the last KT warriors turned to face the party, along with the dozen surviving scum slaves, who look like lizardmen covered in fungus. And the priestess of Blabal has cast like plus 50 worth of range to hit buffs, making their javelins way more effective than they had any right to be. But this party was getting angry now, and they butchered their way through the ranks of minions until the priestess tried and failed to flee into the library. And they reached the last bridge. They can literally see the stone ramp up to the exit. They are basically home free. So of course they get surrounded by a double dose of dog-sized tentacle things and fairy dragonflies, and a giant mutant Feyfell hybrid fairy tentacle dragon dog. Because what they really needed was 140 hit points worth of boss with fast heal, DR, more backlash damage, and long reach tentacles. And the battle takes more than 10 rounds, where virtually every teammate is knocked unconscious at least once, and they use up damn near every healing potion and every single spell that they or GE7 had left. But they finally win, and those who can still walk run up the ramp, hauling a few unconscious dwarves with them, and they shout for Don Horatio's guards, and the Illud Watcher, to get back and dive past the ridge just in time for Draven to suffer through Seven's last moments via telepathy. Yeah, apparently Draven's telepathic link with his homunculus still functions through overloading portal interference and through the indestructible force sphere. Seven has been watching the 3D static of the portal around him. It's really quite beautiful. And he's been watching it long enough to notice a cycle to it. Amidst the static, there are a couple of brief images that flicker every once in a while. One is a room not too different from this one, indicating these may be other possible destinations. Seven figures that when the shield dissipates, he's going to try to go through the portal before it collapses. It will probably just disintegrate him or something, but it seems like a better chance than just sitting there in the blast. Makes sense. And they wait, and then Draven loses contact, and the explosion doesn't really explode. There's a pulse of energy that was felt but not seen, like a menacing gust of wind.
And everyone lived happily ever after.
Next time on Tales from My D&D Campaign.
Also, there will be nudity.
Seriously, after 4 freaking episodes, we are finally done with Ginaron. So at last, we can move on, secure in the knowledge that none of this junk will ever come up again.